Okay, good. Yep, I'll keep you awake. Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody's in. Okay, so my name is Shawn Snyder. I'm the lead pastor of Living Hope Church in Medford, Oregon. Next week will be 6 years, mark 6 years that we came and replanted that church. And so God's really, it's pretty awesome. It was pretty good. And so we got there, I think about 6 years ago. When we got there, you know, you go through the assessment with NAM, you go through all the practical things, you know, and just moving your family. I'm originally from Idaho, and then moved to Memphis, was there for 9 years, and then we were moving back with 4 kids and a dog. And some debate if that's a dog or not. It could be a dog or a rat, depends on what you want to define it. But anyway, we were coming back, and we got there, got to the church. There were 6 people that first Sunday. No kids, and so we were replanting, right? It's exciting. And so as we began to this process, you begin to realize that you're really, we were really alone. It was my wife and I. We were in this all the way in. And again, we were in alone, at least in the we had supporting people behind us. NAM has been a great help. Ron Allen has been incredible to us, just as a friend. Thankfully, he was in that community as well, so he's been a great help to us. And so as we were processing this, one thing that came out of this is how do you develop leaders, right? How do you get people that are qualified? The Bible has standards of leadership. A lot of times in our churches, what we do is someone shows up. We come up with a program idea. Someone shows up, and we're like, okay, this person could be our youth guy. Now, they've come 2 weeks in a row. We don't know anything about the guy, but I'm sure we can have him help watch our kids, right? Or we can do this. We know nothing about them. We know their character, anything. And so the Bible has standards and character. And then one thing, just to be honest, the process that God has taken me through has been extensive. I've had Bible college and seminary training. I've had assessments that have looked at my finances, all these things, just to see if I was qualified to be where I was to pastor this church. And so I want to be honest, that process took a lot of time, a lot of humility, a lot of willingness to walk through some difficult conversations that I had to have for myself, my wife. We dealt with our marriage issues, a lot of these things that made me qualified to be a leader or be a pastor of this church, right? So these were different things that we had worked through. And so as we began to pray through this, began to walk through this, I really didn't come up with the idea. I just kind of really just practiced what I learned. And so I'm going to give you a handout here in a moment, but before I give it to you, there is a lot of information on this one piece of paper, okay? What I tell you about this is we are practitioners. So I'm not an expert. I've just been in Medford, hoping to plant a church, and I was like, okay, this is what's worked for us, okay? And so when I give you this, you're going to say, man, this is a lot of information. Before we give it to you, I want us to kind of work through this together, okay? So think about somebody that's far from God that you know. You're like, man, if this person was to come to church, we might have to look at the foundation of the church because it might close, you know, it might rumble. Like, this is someone that's far away, or maybe just a community person in the community. What would it take for that person to become a spiritual leader in your church? Right? Like, so think about that. Like, that's probably a significant amount of time, you know, that if they were far from God and now 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, whatever it is, they're now a spiritual leader within your church. What are some things that we'd all have to figure out? Well, there's some markers, right? So if someone's to be a Sunday school teacher, they probably have to, first of all, be a Christian, right? Before that, they most likely have to meet you or meet somebody from your church. So those are markers, right? And we have standards or markers, like, so if they're to be, we as Baptists, we believe by immersion, right? So there's something about their baptism has to be marked. And so we also follow a membership. We have membership. So to be a member of our church, all you have to do to be a member of our church is to be saved, be able to share when you gave your life to Christ, and to be baptized by immersion. That's really the bottom standard. Well, and now if you're to help with the kids, you got to pass a background check. So there's another marker, we say. So you got to pass a background check. And then if you're going to teach, we got to hear you teach a little bit, right? We got to know. But also another thing that's got to happen is we got to get to know you. Got to get to know you. And so we're walking them down a pathway. And so if I'm going to make someone a leader, so this is what I tell the people in our church. Now, you may like this or not, but what I say is, look, the day that I make you a leader, or identify you as a leader, because I don't make anybody a leader. The day I identify you as a leader, that's the day I should get a raise, because I'm the smartest guy in the room for bringing you on the team, right? We've all been in church, and someone's like, this guy's the leader. And you're like, how did that guy, right? Yeah, they don't ever come. I don't even know if they give, right? So there's got to be some sort of pathway, some way to know this person. And listen, and then there's people that they're a leader, and you know their story, and a tear comes down your, and he's like, man, that pastor should get a raise for getting that guy, right? That's amazing. Like, there's something about it. And so as we walk through this, now I can look back 6 years ago and see where we are now. Tomorrow, there'll be a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning in our church, which I will not attend. And probably 14 people will be there talking about church business. And they're there every week, 7 o'clock in the morning. If I'm there, I'm not. They're working on church business. They're lay leaders. None of them have been called into ministry yet. There's one that we're praying for, right? None of them are called to be pastors. They're lay leaders. But they're giving their time, their talent, their treasure to be that. That's nothing about my ability. I haven't done anything. I've just listened and watched and given them opportunity. Another thing that's amazing about these individuals is that most of them, so in the last 5 years, so most of them, I would say only 2, maybe 3, were ever leaders of a church. And then probably 5 of them, 5 to 10, have recently been saved in the last 5 years. And they're leaders of the church. And so we say, okay, how did you do this? Well, I'm glad you asked, right? I'm glad you asked, because we do have a process, and you're going to be surprised. You are. You're going to be surprised. Latina, if you'd come, you'd be surprised of how we did this. And what you have here, this is our pathway, okay? And so my pathway, and you'll get this, but our pathway, if you see on the top here, just so you can kind of follow along with us, this is somebody that we meet in the community, our intentional relationship. We're moving them from guest to multipliers where our pathway leads you, okay? So if someone shows up to church tomorrow and they fill out a card or we get their information, they're a guest one time. They show up again, they're an attender. That's what we call an attender, okay? That's the A. And then if you follow the pathway, then a member. And so you can kind of see there's some steps, there's some things that have to take place. Now, what's amazing is now this feels very organic. This looks very structured, but it feels very organic. So people will come, I'll show them this chart, they'll go, yeah. They become multipliers, and then they'll be like, wait a minute, I went through the same process, but it didn't feel that way, because we're very intentional in that, okay? So a couple things that happen, I just want to bring out. Guests, so the bless on the side there, it says there on the top, so you have G, so they've come to church or they come to our event, and then bless, that's our strategy for witnessing. It's be in prayer, listen, eat with them, serve them, and then share with them. And so this is all kind of taking place in time. So a couple things that happen is there a meeting with the pastor. There's some point they need to know me, right? They've come, if they come more than once, they probably like my preaching, or they just didn't hear me, or something, right? There's some relationship that they want to develop. So we want to do that. And then one thing that was interesting, we'd have membership meetings, and we would say, come to the membership meeting. No one show up. Come to the membership meeting. Come to the covenant meeting. Come to all these things. Then we said, you know what? Come to the information meeting. And 30 people showed up. Like, it was crazy. And in that information meeting, guess what we talk about? Membership, kind of the vision, the mission, the values of our church, where we're going, why we're doing what we're doing. Just give them some information. And then so what we see is a marker. So the first marker is that membership decision. So if you're going to be a leader of our church, you have to be a member. You have to be a member. And so we'll walk through that with you. And then what we say is we take you we want to know what your next step is. We never tell people what to do. We just ask them what they believe God wants them to do. And you know what's amazing? They make the decision themselves. And so, and then as they become a member, we see some development goals that we've developed. These are things to be a part of a life group, ministry service, outward focus. These are things that are just kind of the culture of our church, financial support. We're starting to talk about tithing, things like that, but we are still letting you grow in that. Now, that process can take 6 months, can take a year, 2 years. It depends. One of the biggest steps for us we've noticed is that baptism is a accelerator. So it usually takes them a long time to be baptized. So we had a young lady that was baptized. Jordan shared the gospel with her. She made a profession of faith, and then she went away for 2 years. She comes back, gets baptized, and then grows extensively. Like, she really quickly began to, because baptism matters to people, and so they make that public. And also, one thing we do with baptism as well is we don't force it to be on Sunday mornings. If they wanted to do an intimate baptism just with their family, we just want the connections with their family. We'll show a picture or whatever. We'll do that. Like, we'll just let it on their whatever their heart is. So, because again, if we know if they tell that to their family, that's far bigger win than us seeing it at church on Sunday morning. So if they're so their family and that connection with that family, because they're saying, listen, this is a spiritual moment for me, and so that's very, very important, very powerful too. So then we have some workshops. These workshops are to help them grow in their membership. We did one on a toolkit, basically just we did some through Zoom during COVID, but these workshops are really just to help them, whatever development issues I feel like some of our team needs. We'll just have a workshop on Wednesdays. That's something we do. And so now, how do we make them leaders? So now they're active members, they're coming to church regularly, things like that. How do we help them make that decision? So we have what we call our leadership retreat. Now you can see on the picture above, like you see the picture of a leadership retreat. Oh, there is a key to this. So let me tell you this story, and then I'll tell you a little bit about leadership retreat. So we were, my wife and I, we were about to have our 4th child, and so we had to upgrade our vehicle because we needed an extra back row, right? 4 kids, 6 people. Now it's a new vehicle. So I go with my buddy to this auction, and we look at this car, and it looks good. Everything looks good about it. It's great. I mean, it's not a ding. It's a Honda Pilot. Got good miles. Everything. We're fine. I mean, nothing looks wrong. We look at the report, all that it's good. So I was like, you know what? Let's buy it. So we buy the car, and then there's a 3-day window where you can just, if you discover something, you can take it back. And I'm like, I think it's fine. Well, day 4, I'm driving it, and all of a sudden the D on the drive starts to flash. And I'm like, what is that? So I Google it, like every good mechanic, right? I Google it, and it says the transmission issue. So I took it to a mechanic. They looked at it, it's like, yep, well, that window was over. And a lot of times that's what I feel like what it is with leaders, right? You're like, you look at the tire, you kick the tires, you're like, man, this guy looks good. He's got a solid marriage. How do I know he's a leader? And you never know. Listen, you never know until they become a leader, right? It's almost like gambling. Like, okay, I hope this one's going to make it, And so there's got to be some way to figure this out. So what we did with our leadership retreat is another way, let me say it this way too. So the people that there's the people that say they're leaders and they're not, and there's the people that say, I'm never a leader, I'm not a leader, right? And so if I pay for somebody to come to this retreat, they automatically see themselves as leaders, no matter what. And so does everybody around them. Now, you get them to come. Have you ever saw somebody like, man, this person has potential to be a leader, and so you bring them in, and then the church recognizes them as a leader, and now you're like, no, they ain't no leader, right? Like, now you're backtracking. It's like, there's some stuff in there, and you want to try to, hide away from that. So what we do is, and I kind of spilled a little bit, but we make everybody pay for their own way to go. It's not my job to tell me if you're a leader. I don't say this person's a leader. Their life, their actions show their leadership. And the minute, listen, if you're ever at a job, if you're at work and someone says, I'm the boss, I'm in charge here, it automatically tells you, you're probably not in charge. You may have the positional authority, but you're not really the leader, because leaders, you follow. So what we did is we actually have them pay to come to this retreat. We try to make it off campus. We try to make it a great time, get some good food. We try to make it a good thing. And then we show them what it looks like to be a leader at Living Hope Church. So we strive to do that. And so we have our own little thing. And at the end of this, I'll give you this, but I want to just kind of walk through this. So we call it to the last. So if you're going to be a leader, the first step is you need to come to a leadership retreat. Now, sometimes we can do that afterwards. We're not like locked down to this, but that's a big indicator, especially if we don't know you. We want to know, we want to see how you're functioning around the church. Now, again, what's happening is you're a member, so you're showing up to things, you're at church faithfully, you're starting to give. There's some other markers that show us that you're potential multiplier. That's what we call our leaders, or multipliers. So we see some action, we see some things. You're doing some of the jobs that no one else wants to do. One lady, she was, and usually I start to know because they start to get kind of critical or angry when they're not involved in things that they want to be involved. So one lady was like, so me and two other guys, we were trying to get out of taking down the decorations for Christmas. Like, I didn't want to do it at all. And no one, this lady's like, well, how come I didn't know that you guys were taking down the decorations? I was like, well, you know what? You should be a leader because you could have been a part of this. So those are kind of indicators. A lot of times we take criticism. Leaders lead, and we take, as pastors, we're pretty sensitive to this. When someone starts to criticize or question something, we are offended by that. What that's telling us, what's happening is they're trying to help us in that. They're trying to give us some insight because we don't see it all. And so if you feel threatened by that, that's probably going to cause you problems as you develop leaders. But if you're developing strong leaders, they're going to start to question some of the decision-making you have, and they just want a seat at the table, and that's what we're doing. So one thing we did, so we did pay. Now, when I say make them pay, guess who else pays? I pay. I pay for my own family to go to this leadership. And so I paid my own way. And so this actually caused some conflict in my family, I told my wife I'd share this, but she was like, we didn't have the money. And the first one we did not have the money. I'm not kidding. And so not only did no kids were to come, and I have 4, and so it was going to cost us about $300 plus it was about $300, wasn't it? I think the whole charge was, or $300 for the babysitting. It was $300 for babysitting plus the leadership, which we tried to keep the cost down. I think now we're about $100 a person, but we tried to keep the cost down. And so what we did, and so we went to the leadership retreat, had a great time, got a lot of good buy-in from the leaders, and then my wife came home and she checked the mail, and someone I did not even know, because there's moments where you try stuff by faith, wrote us a check for $300 and covered our babysitting fee. And it was just one of those things that God, we were on the right, just kind of to us. It really helped my wife. And so it's a faith. Like, listen, as you lead out in this, it's a faith step. It takes faith and courage to do that. So again, there's lots of ways to do this. And what I would want you to do, you're going to copy what I've done. And you have a different leadership style than I do. So figure out who you are, how you lead, and then just get buy-in. But I do think have those that are interested. And so the way we did it, we just advertised, hey, you want to know what it means to be on what it is on Living Hope Church, how we make decisions, how we function, those things. That's how we got. You got to be teachable. It on Audible, and he would start to read it. And a lot of guys that don't read, they'll listen to Audible books. That's a lot of times I'll do that. I'll let them borrow an Audible book or something that I'm reading that I want them to go. And so they have to be a learner. They have to be accountable. They have to be accountable. They have to be willing to, you also have to count on them, be able to trust that they're going to show up, be accountable. So as they grow into leadership position, we give them authority, we give them responsibility, but then we also kind of coach them around with accountability. Jesus did that. In Matthew chapter 9, he finds Levi, a tax collector, someone that was far from God, right? He invites them into it, and then you see verse 12, he calls the other 12, or chapter 10, he calls all of them all the 12 disciples, and then he takes them out. So he gives them authority. He gives them responsibility. Then later on he would follow and accountable. So on our leadership team, if anybody's a part of our leadership team, they have the authority to spend money, but they have to be accountable. So they have to have 2 other people to talk to before they spend anything. Pick up a phone, and it can't be somebody they're related to. So these are all other things. But so they have to be a learner, accountable. They have to be a servant. So we believe in servant leadership. We believe that if you, so what I tell guys, like, so we're doing a residency program. The way I look at it is anybody can have my job. You just have to outserve me. You have to have, Jesus said himself, you're going to be the greatest, be the least. Be the least. And so we serve. We serve the community. We serve people. My own personal desire to serve God by serving others. That's my own catchphrase. Mission statement is serving God by serving others. That's what my job is. And so if you're going to be a leader at Living Church, you have to be a learner. You have to be accountable. You have to be a servant. Then you got to be a tither. You have to tithe. And we don't make any exceptions to that. This is the way I say it. If we were all of us, we're like, let's go to Disneyland. And you're like, yeah, let's go, right? We'll get a van. We'll get a bus. We'll probably need a bus, right? And we'd be like, and so we'd all hop in the bus. But at some point, there's going to be some conversation. Who's going to pay for the gas, right? Who's going to food? We got some food. Some of you some of you want to ride the rides or do it. Maybe some want to go to some other places on the way, right? It's going to cost. It's going to cost us. And as God called me, listen, when we moved to Medford, we drove into Medford. I'm not kidding you. It cost every penny my wife and I had. Everything. It was all in. When we went to Medford, when we came as a planter, when we were going to replant Living Hope Church, it cost us everything. Our house, it cost us all. And so we got there. And so if you're going to be a part of this, it's got to cost. You got to step up. And again, what's amazing is to see how people would step into this and be a part of it. And just, so what if we were like, okay, we're going to go to Disneyland, but we look at our fund and we're like, man, we don't really have enough. But then some of you big spenders out there, you jump on the bus. It's like, woohoo, we're going, right? Like, it becomes a reality. This is what's beautiful about this, is those 17 people that are currently on our leadership team, they're in this with me. This isn't Shawn Snyder's church, or I'm a part of the team. I get to do life with them and get to experience the highs and lows with them, see faith. They grow my faith. They challenge my faith. They help me in more ways than I could ever say, and they're in this together. We had people in our church, we had a debt. We had about $165,000 debt. We had people step in, and we have no debt now. And they were through our leadership team. We had people that, when we talked about our residency program that we were going to do, and I was pushing out there, like, look, we're going to do this. We had people step up and financially support that. And they're part of our leadership team. They are willing to be a part of this. They're not only just, they're in it for the ride. They are a part of the leaders. They help make the decisions. They help challenge me. When I was praying about going to get my doctorate, one morning man, surely they're going to be like, this is a bad idea, don't do it. Talk to my leadership team, like, yeah, you know what, I think that's a great idea. And so guess what? They hold me accountable. I have to talk to them about decisions. I don't just get to make all of the decisions. Now, I am the pastor, and I have some influence in that team. But if it's a bad idea, boy, they shut it down real quick. You know, they don't go with it. You know, they challenge you. And I think a lot of times the reason why we avoid these kind of teams is because it's hard. We don't always get our way. There was one time, Jordan. Many of you know Jordan. He's doing a work in Southern Oregon, doing a great job at the SOU at the college. We were preparing for our leadership retreat, and so these team members, they not only have to be a part of it, but they eventually will teach, which is a huge step for a lot of them. Like, they're scared to death, you know, they're leaders in their own profession, but when it comes to church and stuff, it's pretty scary. So what they do is so Jordan was there was a conflict of time, like day. So Mondays are my day off, and I'm like, I don't want to have any meetings on Mondays, because I just didn't want to, right? And so the churches I had been a part of, the pastor says that, guess what? They'd be like, okay, no. Well, Jordan's like, well, I can't do Thursdays because we have a small group, we have a life group, and I don't want to close that. And I'm like, well, my day off is far more important. That's my feelings, right? Far more important than your small group or your life group. And he's again, so we kind of brought that in. He brought it before the team. Guess what the team decided? And I watched him too. They thought that I could move my day off, and he needed to have that small group. I didn't get my way. There's a tear in my eye, and I watched it, and I said, "You better have that life group, buddy." But that's the beautiful part. Is if there's a problem, leadership style or the way I treat people, I'd be held accountable. One of the best days of Living Hope Church was, and it was probably about 2 years ago, I realized that I could be fired. And this is a church that had 6 people that had debt and was hurting. Now, 6 years later, if I was to die today or something was to happen, if I was to be fired or removed, this church would function without me. They don't need me. They don't need me. And that's the beautiful. They will meet tomorrow and they'll make decisions, and they'll make good decisions and right decisions. And we'll hold them accountable to those decisions. And so this is the beautiful part of this. And so what I want to do is I want to just open it up to you. Again, I've given you a lot of information, and I will, at the end of it, I'll hand you what the multiplier covenant. So what I have here, they have to read, they go through, and this kind of defines more of what we say about what a leader looks like in our church. It's something just to help you. And then all of them have to sign that at the end. They have to sign it out at the end. So it's that's kind of a big picture of what we do, how we get them. The pictures you see here are our leadership retreat. We had 24 people come to this, and then out of that 10, we shared some different things. We have a different theme each year. We kind of talk about it, and we work through a book usually. We find a good book. We're actually going to go through Dave Ferguson's Bless. That's our evangelism strategy. I'm not usually one that copies other people, but this one was really good. That's where you be in prayer, you listen, you eat, you serve, and then you share. Those are some things. So any questions, anything about what I've covered so far, about the leadership pipeline, anything you might have about what you're looking at? I know it's the last little bit, tired. Yes. Yep. Okay, yep. We just had this conversation just not too long ago. What it is what we do is we go through, so they've been a part of our church. We preach in November. We usually do a series on generosity. We usually touch about giving, things like that. That's kind of, and then, so we've also shared in our information class the importance of giving. And then they have developed relationships with other multipliers who have experienced that or have recently. So I'll give you stories. Shane, they were going through some financial trouble, and COVID was starting, and they committed that they were going to. They actually gave their last their stories. Like they gave their last $20, trusting the Lord, and God provided in a big way. He had some back issues. He got an insurance check that they had already said they wasn't going to get, and it was like the timing. And so his story starts to carry influence within the team. So as they do that, so we just see steps. So what we do is we think of steps. They're a learner, they're accountable, they're serving, and then we're having conversations as we walk with them, and it's coming up different times. And then when we sit down with them, we talk about what it means to be a learner, what it means to be accountable, and then why give. So one thing we say is like there's been thousands of dollars given by other churches and other people. Where do you think that money comes from? Right? People. And so we say we want to go to Disneyland, and I use that a lot, right? We say, but actions have to show that, right? There's a point when you're really into something, if you're into any kind of thing, so we just kind of bring it up in a natural way, but then challenge them, and then we say, this is your next step. That's how we kind of word it. It's like, this is what we expect, this is your next step, and then we just give them some time to take that step, and we don't tell them they can't. We just say, this is your next step, and we just kind of wait to see how they respond. I believe personally in, like, when I think of discipleship, I think of obedience more than I think of instruction. So when you're, they're obedient, they're doing something, there's action there, and so those are ways we do it. And then what's happening as well is, so first it was a lot on me, but as team members bought into the same thing, you can't, like, so we also limit. So at first we had people that were in places that did not do these things, okay? But as we brought them to the retreat, we clearly go over the finances, which shows no money, right? At times, like, look, and there was one guy he wasn't a Christian. He saw what we were giving, and he saw what I was being paid at that time. And he's like, how do you do this on this? Like, how do you raise a family? Like, and he wasn't a believer. And now eventually he did become a believer, but he understands, and the more transparent we were with the finances, but that leadership retreat is a great time, and it would be a different time to go over tithing and also your budget. That's when we go over the budget. We show them, we show all that we're doing, where the money's going, things like that. So I don't know if that helps that answer your question. Yeah. And then I try to think of it as a conversation. Look, I just don't want to do it alone. And so the more I think of my own track, I've learned these things myself. These are not, and I'm not the only one that should benefit from these things. Best thing I've ever did was tithing, giving to the Lord. And I just share that, and that's not because I'm a preacher. If I lost my job, I'd still tithe because it's what I could do. And I truly believe that. So, but again, I think we're afraid of those conversations. I also think we need to show that. So we just demonstrate it clearly, and it's easier to, have people watch what you're doing than try to teach them or tell them. So, any other questions? Anything else? Okay. Yep. So it'll go to 100. My dream is every person in our church would be a multiplier. So each of them have different roles. They kind of tell me what they basically tell us eventually what they want to do or what they do. So we have a youth guy. One thing we notice, every person that became a multiplier would eventually start a small group. So they became leaders within that. So a small group, some of them have people. That's one of the requirements too, that they take on a leadership role. So they may be helping with kids. Now they need to start leading a kids thing, and they'll be kind of walk through that. So the way our pathway kind of continues is, as somebody that is called into ministry, I'm also looking for that planter. So I believe that if you keep saying yes to Jesus, my dream is this: guy walks to the door of the church Sunday, comes, gets saved, keeps saying yes to Jesus, walks down this, feels a call of God in his life, and then at some point we have a gospel goodbye where I'm sending them to go plant or replant or pastor a church somewhere. That's my dream. And so that's where I'm just saying yes. So a lot of them do. One guy does finances. They all do the different leadership tasks. Yep. And we just let them Yep, that's right. And so also what this does too is I'm not just creating jobs. So if they say, listen, we need, I'm trying to think of something. So like I'm not making jobs up to find people to fill them. They're coming in, I'm growing leaders, and then they're saying, listen, we need to have somebody reach out to the firefighters. Well, you know what? You would do a great job doing that, right? So they create their own job for them because God's calling them into that. So it also, I'm not trying to create new jobs. I don't want jobs created for me, and neither do other people, right? So there's a hand here. Yes. Yep. Not, we let them share theirs. We don't, so usually it's a conversation between me or. So again, we're walking with them, we're watching them, and what they do is God uses what you like usually. So when I first got saved, thing I could do is I was a janitor in high school and college, and guess what I did? I cleaned the church. So you get a place to start, and you just listen to what one lady had done bookkeeping. I'm like, you know what? We could really use your help in bookkeeping. And so we found a spot where she could fit. And so I try to find where they're good at. Shape, I think that's pretty, the shape thing, where your spiritual gifts, your heart, your, what's the, personality, and then experiences. So we use that to just kind of get where they are. And just we walk with them, and then there's also some directions, like, look, I saw you with those kids. I think you can really do a great job if you'd help, this person, or tell us where they're wanting to go. Now, they're also recruiting as well. So they're as a multiplier, you're trying to multiply. You're trying to give your job away. And so we're building that into others. So they're finding other people that are doing the same thing. Okay? So if they were a bookkeeper. So one thing I realized that attract musicians, right? So if you're good, I can't get any musician to come, right? But someone that plays musician, that plays any guitar or something, man, they know all of them. So I want them to try to build that team themselves. Okay, so there's a hand back here somewhere. Yeah. My car got crushed. Well, I got it fixed. So that was actually a story. So my wife, so this is, okay, so here's what happened. So we got it fixed, but what was funny is my wife's like, well, we'll pray. We had a debate, and we can actually solve this debate right now, okay? This will be great. So, yeah. So what happened is she said, well, I'm going to pray that God fixes it. And I'm like, well, God doesn't fix mechanical objects like that. Like, he can, but that's not the norm. Now, usually what he does is bring mechanics in your life or somebody, right? So she's like, I'm still praying. Well, her prayer life and she did pray in a year. It was like a year later. So it lasted a year, but we did find a mechanic. So we were both right. So I did get a mechanic who gave me a deal, and I got it fixed cheaper. So it was a transmission, and it lasted. And then that car got wrecked later, but that's a whole nother story. So, yeah. So again, this isn't what I would encourage you are. Again, as I would just begin to think through your own process. Think if you're happy with your process, keep going. Just keep doing it. If you're not, and you just like, man, we don't have the leaders that we want to grow leaders, how do I do that? I would begin to think through your process and think through how you can do that. And I'm telling you, it sounds crazy, but making them pay to go to that retreat was a changer. Because now, there was a couple people that were, one guy I tried to disciple, he would not tithe. He didn't believe in it. He said it wasn't biblical. And I'm like, well, he couldn't be a leader. Like, you just can't be a leader. And so eventually went somewhere else. But what that did is that gave me, because the worst thing for me would be bring him a leader and then realize he's not going to do it. Right? Now I'm like either apologizing to other people or eventually firing him, or you know what I mean? There's kind of things that I want to avoid those things. So the more I know in the front end, and so what that did is it just gave us time, and then so once they come to the retreat too, I'll have a conversation with them, and then I'll tell them some things that listen, we love to invite you in. It's all inviting. I do want them to be safe, but I want it to be done right. And I was like, we want to invite you in, but here's some areas we think you should grow in, and we'll help you in that. How can we help you grow in this area? How can we do this? There was one couple there that he's grown. He's probably further on, but she's not. And so we're like, we don't want to put, any kind of confrontation in your marriage. We want to help you, want to grow you. And also, as you become a leader, there's spiritual battle that takes place. So we don't cause more problems than is. And so that helps us remember that, look, that we want to be a serious business. And the minute you start stepping into this arena, there is an enemy that wants to knock you out. And so we really are careful. We walk with people where they are. And again, what's amazing is, again, we've seen people grow spiritually, incredibly quickly. And as the team is strengthened, so our team is growing as well. We're still developing this. Like, I'm still working through this. And what we've done is we have opened it up to as any person can become a multiplier. And then the hope is as we grow, as someone's called into ministry, so there's a calling, you see that calling part, that they feel like they're called into ministry, that they would take some of those multipliers with them and go plant. So that this team would take, like, it'll be a sad day for me, but it'll be a great day for that church to go take 4 or 5 people that are already learners, they're already accountable, they're already serving, and they're already giving, to go help a pastor plant. Like, that would be ideal, And so what's beautiful too with COVID, and I'm just about done. So with COVID happened, we basically went to replant mode again, like shut down. But this time, it's not just my wife and I. It's my wife. We're going to launch out in September, almost all over again. We're going to launch out again. We got a whole plan. But it's not just 2 of us, it's 17 of us. And we're all pulling the same direction, the same desire. I'm excited to see what the next chapter looks like, so it's really exciting. So I'll also, I'm going to go ahead and pray for you guys, just because that's what I don't know, feel like we need to close up with a prayer. But then I'll have these up here if you want some more information on what, like a multiplier, a little more detail. Feel free to use any of this stuff. Yes. Yep, we kick you out of the church. We send you this, and we were good. Go. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I know, Matt. So again, you don't suck. We just have to grow. We just have to start. Yeah. It's like, you know what? We know, and again, you're probably our leader. You just need to grow. So, and then we have tiers. So you're a leader of your